Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. Anyone else but me. No, no, no. Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me.
Hi there. So we are still in the early stages here of some breaking news, and there isn't a lot to say about it yet beyond the original, but something needed to be said. So I just wanted to make a quick video and just put out a few thoughts that I had based on the information. So let's get into this. Now, I want to state very clearly that this is alleged. We don't know if it's real. We don't know all the details. All I can say is what I see that the Duchess of North Sussex has posted here. I don't know any more details than what we're looking at. Duchess of North Sussex says 100% fact. Meghan's niece, Ashley, quit her job to become Lily's surrogate mother, which makes Samantha Lily's grandmother. Meghan photoshopped Ashley's belly onto her own body. And the 4th of July picture is Abigail Spencer, not Meghan. Meghan, the gig is up. Now, it's up to you to determine how you want to evaluate the Duchess of North Sussex. If you want to believe that she is a very intelligent woman and has been making videos about two highly litigious people for some time now without getting in trouble, you can determine whether or not you think it is likely that she would put 100% fact with no allegedly, could be, maybe, possibly, do your own research attached to it if she was not 100% sure that this was, in fact, the case. That's for you to evaluate and you to evaluate the source. That's what I've been doing a lot of this lately, and people don't really like it, and I don't understand it. As a historian, the very first thing that we do when we read anything is we evaluate the source. Because if you evaluate the source and you determine that the source is incredible, then how can any of the information that that source is telling you be credible? What I was doing with Lady C, that's what I've been doing with the Carl Larson stuff. Right from the beginning, that's what you have to do, because if you don't trust the sources, then the information is pretty much a waste of time. So, once you evaluate the Duchess of North Sussex, if you believe that she would not put this out there unless she was reasonably sure, I want to take the next step. How much this would mean, because there's a lot. Let's start with this. This is a brief clip from an interview between Samantha Markle and Dan Wooten. And in this clip, they are discussing the recent release of the Netflix docudrama Harry and Meghan. And in this clip, Samantha indicates that her and her daughter were getting close once again.
So horrible about what she's done in this TV show is she's actually weaponized your own daughter, Samantha Ashley. But finally, she did have to admit that she uninvited your daughter to her wedding. Watch this.
I don't think anyone understands what that very small comms team was dealing with. They just couldn't wrap their head around, and I have compassion for it. How do we explain that this half-sister isn't invited to the wedding, but that the half-sister's daughter is? And so, with Ashley, the guidance at the time was to not have her come to our wedding.
Wow.
Firstly, yeah, wow, what a porky pie. When that happened, also at the same time, we had found out that with my dad's heart attack, the Queen and King Charles wanted to reach out. but we heard that my sister said no. Similarly with this, I just recently found out, it's really sad because Ashley and I were on talking terms. I thought, bonding after not speaking for a while, even though we did speak. I wanted my kids to be raised with their grandparents because I didn't trust babysitters. When I was dealing with disability and having to work, I didn't know anyone in Los Angeles well enough that I felt safe with that. So I felt like I was doing the
Yeah, because
admirable
you're in a
thing.
wheelchair, Sam, and you were going
Yeah.
through, and you admit it, you were going through a very difficult divorce, but you
Right.
always knew that your daughter was safe with her paternal grandparents.
So now, if Lily was born in 2021, and by 2022, the release of the Netflix documentary is what is going to ruin any chance of a reconciliation between Samantha and her daughter, Ashley, then that would mean that they were doing this just starting to talk again, bit while Ashley would have been carrying said child in the surrogacy, allegedly, if, in fact, this story is true. So if it is true, then they were getting close at a time when what? Samantha was talking to Ashley and Ashley didn't tell her this? I mean, it's kind of a big thing, don't you think? Mom, I'm playing surrogate for your half sister. You gotta kind of tell your mom that. I mean, I would tell my mom that, that's for darn sure. But it makes you wonder about any of this story then, because she would have had to have been telling her then. And if that's the case, why didn't Samantha tell us that 4 or 5 years ago? Why are we just hearing these sorts of things now? Well, the answer is because none of it's true. But even if it were true, it would still be a story that contradicts itself and contradicts the previous narratives that they have given us. So, from time to time, we have heard the possibility that Thomas Markle Sr. would be suing for the right to visit with Lily and Archie. Well, if he is not, in fact, a grandfather, but potentially even a great grandfather, then again, it's unlikely that he would ever have any chance of winning any sort of said case. Could this be why, and them knowing this, could it be why he doesn't pursue that ever, right? So we hear about it and people suggest it and people say he should do it, but he never pursues it. If they know for a fact that he is in fact not the grandfather, then that would explain why he doesn't pursue any sort of a legal alternative. Additionally, there is the fact that, as this article says, and the problem with this article is that it is, in fact, from In Touch Weekly. And In Touch Weekly, as we know, is highly biased towards Meghan and Harry. But In Touch Weekly claims that he has no right because of his past history of doing self-serving things, and the idea that potentially he would be suing for the right to visit with the children only because he wants to then be able to talk about it and make an issue of it and use it essentially against Harry, Meghan, and in a way against the kids by trying to do it. So understandably, I don't think he could win any sort of a lawsuit, but the fact that he doesn't even try, I mean, the fact that you can't win the lawsuit has never once stopped Samantha from trying to sue Meghan. Same thing. I mean, she has as good of a chance of succeeding as Thomas Markle Sr. would if he tried to sue for the right to see the grandkids. But that doesn't stop them. The ludicrousness of their potential suit doesn't generally stop them from suing. However, if he wouldn't even get past the fact that he's not the grandfather and that it would in fact reveal other things about who the paternity or grandparenternity, is that what it would be? Grandpaternity of the child is, that might be why they don't even want to open that Pandora's box. Other thing that it could reveal is how much the they are, in fact, in touch with Meghan, right? Because if they sue or don't sue, then you're putting any of their information or anything that they know or any communications and things like that, they're putting it into public record. So they're going to hold back from doing those sort of things. So it's an interesting dynamic on how they might be playing that. Problem that the Markles have is that since each time they go out and do an interview, they come up with a different story or a different explanation or a different narrative. When they then are asked similar questions, they have to kind of double back and fix the narrative along the way. So even though when Samantha sat down with Dan Wooten, all she thought about was, I want people to be angry with Megan for using my daughter in her show. That's all she thought about. She never would have thought about, well, what if A comes out or B comes out or C comes out, in which case it would make what I'm saying a lie. They don't think that far ahead. They very much so think in the moment, and in the moment, they do what is ever going to work the best for them, whatever is going to make them look the best, sound the best, get the most attention. And since they do it in such a way, they end up getting themselves in more trouble because they can't plan ahead to what the next lie would then have to be. So, Samantha, if it now comes out that Samantha's daughter is in fact the surrogate, what are they going to say? Are they going to say, "Oh my goodness, now she lied to me about that"? Well, then we don't feel so bad anymore that Megan kind of destroyed the relationship with your daughter because your daughter must be just like Megan, and therefore it's no real loss, right? And I'm not saying that's the case. It's that that will become the perception, and they don't want that perception. They want the empathy perception. It's the only one that they want. And anything that could endanger that perception, they're not going to be happy with. Now, if you read through the comments, as reported by the Duchess of Narsussex, it is in fact not even Meghan's egg. The report is that it is in fact Ashley's eggs that were used in the surrogacy. Now, if that is the case, then clearly this would cause humongous ramifications in terms of the line of succession and the titles, for Lily at least. This doesn't mean whatever is the case with Archie. There's no reports on that. That we don't know. But the fact that there are in fact reports that these would in fact not be Meghan's children biologically in any way, shape, or form, that would obviously cause a problem with the line of succession because a legitimate heir to the throne has to be born within marriage, right? So the kids, if they're not born within the marriage, then they are clearly not eligible for the titles and any of the associated lineage, line of succession, all that stuff that goes along with the title. Also worth noting that, yeah, n- that photo, the ones that we're looking at right now, that photo of Thomas Sr. and Lily, they look very much alike. But how do we know that's Lily? We don't. And if you look at photos of Ashley, Ashley doesn't look like a Markle. She doesn't look like her mother. She doesn't look like Thomas Sr. So it would be odd for Lily to come out looking so much like her great grandfather, if it was in fact Ashley's eggs that were used, because Ashley doesn't look much like her father. And I don't know that Samantha looks much like Senior either. I think that Junior looks a lot like Senior, but I don't know. I'm not necessarily seeing it with Samantha. Final revelation of the post is that this is in fact Abigail Spencer and not Megan. And it's funny, as soon as I read that and saw the photo again, I was like, oh, of course. It makes sense now. I would not have ever picked out that it was Abigail Spencer. I probably would have said it was just some random person. Potentially, they took the photo of someone that was, that comes with the photo with the frame, with a picture frame or something like that, and put them in it next to a lily. a lily, a mock lily, a surrogate lily. I keep looking for another word, and all the words are just not working for a replacement lily. But as soon as I saw Abigail Spencer and looked at it, I was like, ah, of course. And we've seen that time and time again over the last couple months. All of these times that Abigail is being taken as the photo for Megan. Why? Why isn't it just Megan in the photo? Why is it always Abigail? And that opens up a dynamic that it's not making any sense to me on why they would use the same person, why they would use someone they know. Why wouldn't they just use an AI photo instead of using Abigail? There's something about that that's very odd and it's not fitting in and it's not making sense to me. I very much so would be interested to hear what you might think about why that is. Because now that I see that, and I'm looking at this photo as I'm talking, now that I see that, yes, that makes sense. That looks like Abigail. Now, would I have said that if we hadn't seen all these recent attempts to use Abigail as Megan stand-in? Probably not, but I see it now. So with the Duchess of Narsissex's post, I of course had to come on and say something because it is pretty amazing that if that is true, that would be a big deal. And it's funny because I do have the intention of getting back to the Markle Foundation and getting back to Ashley's role and Ashley's law firms and how they might connect to that. I haven't had a chance between my father passing and then all the Megxit drama. I haven't had time to go back to that, but that is something that I would still want to look at, and it will be very interesting because remember, the Duchess of Narsussex said she took a year off to do this. So this wasn't just that she did it. She did it and was willing to take a step back from her career in order to do that. All very interesting. Very interesting when you look at what Ashley has done since then. Because you would then expect that there would be some perks to this or not perks to this. I think it went the way of the perks, which might mean that this was done for someone more than just Meghan. Now, of course, I don't have sources like the Duchess of Narssussex. I am only basing on what if the Duchess of Narsussex's post is true. I have no idea if it is. She seems to be rather convinced, and that is for you to judge whether or not you believe that she is telling the truth in that post, or whether or not that's not the right way to say it. I don't doubt that she was told this. Whether or not you want to believe the veracity of how far she would go to research her own sources, so that she wouldn't say something like this if she didn't have very solid evidence. That's what I personally believe about the Duchess of Narcissus. It would then be for you to make your determination. I don't know any of this. This was just a what if. If this is true, what could that mean? And what might the ramifications be? So, I look forward to reading your thoughts down in the comments. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you all have a great day filled with love, laughter, and of course, dancing.
Dancing